Hey, so welcome back to the Dirt Road. I'm here with Rick.
That's Mike over there.
This is our hidden farm that you'll never find in the city, New York.
Beautiful farm, Mike. You do good work, I gotta tell you that. Listen, you're gonna be very disappointed in this video if you're playing our drinking game, because I can't see one way this man could bring Lindsey Graham into the topic of education.
The man is evil. He had some responsibility. Somewhere, somehow, he found his way into the education system to dumb down America.
Take a shot.
Lindsey Graham. Welcome
back.
You can be drunk the rest of the video.
Welcome back to the Dirt Road, everybody. We've been talking a lot about politics lately, but this time we thought we would talk about something that is on a lot of people's minds, obviously, and that's the state of education in America. We're both parents. His kids are a lot younger than mine. I spent over 3 decades in the education system. But I'm going to let Mike start us off because he's got some things on his mind about the state of education today. And as a dad, certainly has that right. So
Yeah.
What were you thinking, Mike?
So, to me, the education system in America has a tremendous amount of problems, right? We have fallen so far from where we were in even the 70s, where we were pretty high up on the list of education in the world, to now being damn near the bottom. You know, the dumbing down of America is real. You know, regardless of how we got here, we are far more ignorant as a nation than we ever were in history. And, you know, I think there's a lot of things at play there. It's not one specific thing you can point to, although I do think Carter's an asshole and the Board of Education at the federal level is a complete disaster. But that's my opinion. But there's a lot of things that got us here. So we're going to talk today about kind of those things, what we think led us to this point and what we could do to maybe come back from it and bring back our education system. Because we have these amazing, fine teachers, tremendous amounts of them, just amazing teachers out there doing just great things every day that truly care about their students, they care about education, they care about these subjects, and they're doing the best they can to kind of instill that love of learning and instill that knowledge that needs to be there to build a base of a really strong, good, intelligent adult. You know, but we'll talk about all that as we go into it. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at with this whole thing. During my campaign, I was a big proponent of school choice. I think that puts a good kind of pressure on a system to kind of force it to do well, right? It kind of it raises the bar, and it kind of makes them kind of come to a place where it actually works for the students, which is really the ultimate goal, you know. And I have my complaints about the unions and things of that nature. I don't dislike unions, period, don't get me wrong, but I don't like the amount of influence that the teachers union exercises in politics and some other things. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there, but we'll go through it all.
So I think most people would agree that we do have a problem with education, but I do think it's also blown out of proportion in some ways. You look at every survey, and there are surveys that are done on a yearly basis on this, and a huge percentage of Americans say they're very dissatisfied with the American education system. Yeah. But in the same surveys, when you ask them about their child's school, and specifically about their child's teacher, you get almost 90% satisfaction.
Right.
So there seems to be a problem there, right? If people are under the impression the American education system is in such disarray, but yet 80-90% of them feel their school is good, then it's a weird kind of dynamic, right? Because people are seeing what they're seeing in their real life as a positive thing, yet when you talk about it in generalities, all of a sudden they think it's bad. So I think a lot of times we're fed things in the media
that don't necessarily match up.
Yes,
right.
and we come to these conclusions. So that, and also there is no education system in America. You know, education is localized. The federal government does have a lot to say, obviously, because where there's federal money, there's federal say.
Right.
But for the most part, education rises and falls with the local system.
Absolutely,
You know?
Absolutely.
So it depends on where you are.
Sure.
As far as unions go, I think they've just become a boogeyman. You know, and it's...
That's 100% true in the media. 100% true.
Yeah, and I think especially in conservative circles, I am a strong supporter of unions, both public and private. Public unions, public sector unions and private sector unions.
No, I agree.
But I feel that way, believe it or not, because of my conservative principles. As a conservative, I always feel like conservatism is to have a healthy skepticism of power, right?
Absolutely.
And money is power.
Yeah.
And politics is power.
Yeah.
Public services are run by politicians, and that power needs to be checked. And public unions, whether it was the PBA, the policemen's union,
DEA,
or the UFT, the
UFT,
teachers unions, and the AFT,
sure. Yep.
regardless of the politics, and I fully get why conservatives hate the politics of unions, but there's reasons for that. Like, the Republican Party for a long time, from the time Reagan left office to the time Trump got into office, right? Reagan wasn't like this. Trump wasn't like
bashing.
this.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Union bashing.
So why in the hell would a union support you if in your platform, you say you want to destroy
your whole premise is you want to break unions?
But
Absolutely.
public sector unions, your union, the PBA,
sure,
was they were the eyes and ears against what the city was doing, right? They brought about, if there was any kind of corruption, if the police system, if anything in the police department was going wrong, it was your union that would bring that to light.
Sure.
Your union was a check on the police commissioner and a check on the
City
mayor.
Hall, on City Hall
Exactly.
power. Exactly.
And I think that's a conservative value, right? Is to have that skepticism and power.
Have a balance and a check on that power.
Yes,
absolutely.
And private unions obviously are the check on the money, right?
Yeah,
the money power.
Yeah.
So my love of unions, my belief in unions, my complete backing of unions is because of my conservative principles. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So what I'm talking about with that is, well, first of all, let me approach the survey thing that you talked about.
Sure.
So you take the survey where the teachers and people are happy, but I think that's a testament to what I said originally, that teachers, by and large, overall, are truly amazing people.
They are.
They truly are. And they deserve our respect, absolutely. And I think that I truly, honestly believe that. And I think that survey just kind of highlights the fact that most people probably feel the way I do about teachers, like they're these great people that do the absolute best they can for their students.
Well, then why would you think the education system is in such disarray if you don't feel that way about the school your children go to?
Because I think that a lot of the problems stem when you get beyond the teachers, when you get into administration.
So
and I think that's what most Americans feel like. Mismanagement, with money, mismanagement with even like, what is it? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Give me 1 second. No. So mismanagement with the money, mismanagement with curriculum, where sometimes curriculum is being pushed that people don't agree with, So if you're bringing like, the gender study stuff that we always talk about, this is a big one in the media, right? Gender study stuff. We'll talk about that. If it's being pushed in, elementary schools, that's a very, very inappropriate place for that kind of stuff. That's a conversation for a family to have, not for a school to teach.
Yes.
So things like that, I think, are what kind of spur that whole idea that this whole thing is failing. But if you look at the overall American landscape and Americans as a whole, I think there's a lot of things that play that dumb down America. I don't think it was necessarily just the education system. So I don't want to feel like I'm putting all the blame in one place, because I'm not. And I'm definitely not putting it on teachers. I'm putting it on administrators at much higher levels, really. Superintendents and above. And when you get into the federal system, that's really where you see a lot of it. But, I think the technology, so the internet, iPhones, things like that, all kind of played a part in that as well. A big part in that. We talked about that.
Yes. And look, obviously, results don't lie. And the numbers just, they're there. And a very large percentage of our children don't read at grade level.
Yep.
They don't do math at grade level.
Yep.
We're falling behind other countries. I just don't know that. I know people are going to say you have to blame the school because the school is where the education is coming from. But I just believe it's much more of a cultural issue than anything else.
I think that when we were kids, right, you did your homework. Your parents made sure you did your homework. And if you screwed up in school, if my teacher called home and said I screwed up in school, I was catching an ass whooping. Rightfully so, but I was catching an ass whooping. Right? Yeah. That doesn't happen anymore now. Now you call home and it's, he would never. And somehow you blame the teacher, right?
All the time.
So there's this narcissistic shift in our culture where it's this instant gratification coupled with this instant need to be validated constantly, coupled with the fact that nobody's responsible for anything anymore. I think that's a big part of the problem too.
Right,
so it's
and that's cultural decay.
Right, and I think that's it's a big part of the problem that's not talked about in regards with this.
Sure, but look, I kind of have two things going at once. I'm a big supporter of public schools. Public schools made America, right? It was how people got their chance. It was
of course, absolutely, and I'm all for it. Yeah.
Right. It was how a poor kid could rise to become an entrepreneur.
Sure.
If they didn't have public education, that wasn't going to happen.
Of course.
Right? So I'm a big supporter of public schools. I personally sent all of my children to Catholic school.
Right.
But that wasn't because I didn't believe in public schools. That was just a personal choice
Well, it was more had more to do with your faith than anything
exactly.
else. Yeah.
So it was more that. And so I think those two systems can coexist.
Sure.
And I just wanted to put that out there because I don't want to be called a hypocrite if somebody I know is watching this and says, well, how do you support public schools yet you send your kids to Catholic school? That was just a personal family issue. The local schools where my kids could have gone were good.
Yeah.
I just wanted them in Catholic school. So it doesn't have, it's not being hypocritical. But I think just too much of the blame goes on the schools. I mean, you were blaming, Jimmy Carter and the Department of Education and all of that.
Yeah, I think it's
schools are a reflection of their community.
Yeah, but Jimmy Carter thing is, like, we don't need more federal agencies. We don't. The more federal bureaucracy you create, the more bogged down the system becomes, and more ridiculous it becomes, and the more weaponized it becomes. We've seen that with the IRS since at least Obama's reign with Lois Lerner, right, when she attacked all the conservative groups and audits and things like that. Bureaucracy can be weaponized. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, but that bureaucracy, weaponized. I don't know if that bureaucracy is. I mean, you talk about the Department of Education. I think the two biggest things were bipartisan. The two biggest changes in education. We had No Child Left Behind.
Right. Yes.
Bipartisan.
Yeah.
It was George W. Bush and Teddy Kennedy.
Right.
And you had then Obama's answer to that, or continuation, I call Race to the Top.
Right. Yes.
And it was all about how to rate teachers and standards and blah 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 blah, blah and all of that, as if the whole country is a monolith, which it's not.
It's not.
It's not. So that's the bureaucratic part that I think it caused more problems than good.
Well, yeah, because you have administrators coming down from way up here and going into a classroom where you're teaching that know nothing about teaching and telling you you're doing it wrong and here's how you're going to do it. Right. We saw the same thing in policing, right, with the whole George Floyd, BLM crap, whatever that went on. By the way, just off the subject, but George Floyd died of a fucking overdose, okay? Chauvin should not be in damn prison.
Stick to education.
It's disgusting, okay? The man died of a fentanyl overdose. Disgusting, shouldn't have happened, it's a shame, but that man's not guilty of murder. Just had to be said. Back to education. You have this, like, at the time, they brought all these people in who know nothing about policing, and now they're going to talk to you about policing. It's ridiculous. Let the teachers teach. If I want to learn about farming, I'm going to a damn farmer. I'm not going to some asshole sitting in a office.
Okay, let the teachers teach, but yet we have this big movement on the Republican side or on the conservative side that parents want more of a say in the curriculum.
I don't think that. Well, I understand the say in the curriculum thing, and then that stems more from, I think, the LGBT stuff being pushed in schools, or even some of the DEI crap that they were pushing in schools and things of that nature. They keep renaming it, but that was where that came from, because parents started paying attention. They're finding pornographic books in these schools. They're finding, these
parents should
programs.
have 100% say on that stuff.
Listen,
I'm not arguing that.
I just want to see schools go back to teaching, like teaching what they should teach. Like, teach the history, but teach it honestly. Listen, good, bad, and different. They should be teaching the history of America, right? And America's not always the good guy in history. Not even close.
No, and I've said this in other videos, Mike. History's not about good guy and bad guy.
Exactly.
It's not.
Just teach the history so they can learn for themselves and understand how things happen and how they develop and what the kind of ripple effect you see. So I think teaching those things is important. But when we start veering off into all this extra craziness shit, that's where I think it becomes a problem. And I think parents, by and large, parents, especially the ones I talked to during the campaign, and I talked to a lot of them, Moms for Liberty, a bunch of groups, honestly on both sides of the political aisle I spoke to about this, the biggest complaint that I got and the most consistent statement I got was, we just want to be able to say, no, not this.
Yeah, and I agree, but I just think that that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is the breakdown of the family unit. It's parents working their asses off, working their asses off. I got that out, and not being involved enough in their kids' education. That's where I think, again, this is a cultural problem. America's suffering a cultural breakdown.
Oh, without a doubt.
And it's
been eroding since the 60s.
And it's affecting education. I don't think the education system is the cause of the problem. I think the education
symptom of a
system,
bigger problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's where I am with that. But some of the political arguments out there are just political arguments. So we talk about things like school vouchers.
Yes,
most conservatives are for that, right?
Sure.
Not school choice. School choice is more about charter schools, right?
Well, school choice.
Well, yeah, right. It's also about vouchers. Right?
It's about vouchers. They kind of, it's a big tent that they stick everything under, but I like the voucher thing.
So here's my question to you.
Let the money follow the child.
You're a conservative person, right?
Yep.
Okay. Here's why I'm 100% against vouchers. 100% of it. I work 3 jobs to send my kids to Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
If that kid sitting next to my kid is there on government money, I can guarantee you one thing and one thing only. The Catholic school's going to have to follow what the government tells them to do.
Right.
That's it. And then that takes away the whole idea of the Catholic education. I can't stand the thoughts of vouchers because it's a liberal idea to be against the vouchers, but I'm doing it for conservative reasons. My conservative reason is where the government puts their money, the government puts their nose. And
that's true.
And that's it. That's just a fact. So once they put their money into the Catholic schools like that, and the kids that are there on government money, on taxpayer money, well, then the taxpayers have a say in what's going on. And then what happens? Then all of a sudden the Catholic schools can't teach Catholicism. Well, the Catholic schools are going to be told that they have to have the same hiring standards as public schools. And that takes away the whole idea of a private education. Now, I understand everybody can't afford private education. Everybody can't afford, not everybody could afford the greatest doctors. Not everybody could afford the greatest lawyers. Conservatives are against Obamacare. They're against Medicare for all. Well, why? If you're in favor of every kid getting the top-notch education, then why shouldn't everybody get top-notch health care? Why shouldn't everybody get top-notch legal representation? I don't understand why conservatives draw the line at education. Education, all of a sudden, is a place where government should step in and make sure that there's, equity across the board and everybody's entitled to the same education, and if you can't afford it, it's okay, we'll pay for you. But when it comes to health care, no. If you can't afford the greatest doctor, well, that's just on you. You can't afford the greatest doctor, you have to go to a clinic. So I don't understand that dichotomy there.
So I agree with you. First of all, the government shouldn't have any say in any of that stuff, and you don't want that because, again, you're right, they would have absolutely stick their nose in and try and push some bullshit agenda. But the way I envisioned it when we ran the campaign and when we spoke about it, the way we envisioned it, or the way I envisioned it, and a lot of us spoke about this, was to simply not have the government funding that student going to school. But if your child's in this school district, you're paying school taxes in this school district, you should be able to decide, okay, my child's going here and those taxes should follow that child, period, that's it.
But why into a private school? Why should public money pay for private school?
Then you can give that family a waiver if they're not utilizing that public service, and they should waive that tax and give them that money back so they can pay themselves to go to that school.
Then would you agree to the same thing for legal representation in healthcare then? I don't understand why there's the difference just for education. Why education should the money follow the child, and because the taxes are in this district, they should be able to choose wherever they... Well, then why not give health vouchers? Why not give people vouchers to get health care so that they could go see the best doctors? Why not give them vouchers so that they could get the best lawyers? Why not give them vouchers so they could get the best real estate agents? Why just with education?
Because here's the difference, right? Those other services... So my insurance, right? I pay for my insurance, I pay for my insurance. That's how it works. You're paying... Even in a public union, so to speak, right, as a teacher or a cop or whatever, you look at your pay stub, you're paying that premium. Yeah. Now, the city's paying part of it, but you're still paying into it.
Right.
What you're talking about is giving it to people who aren't paying into it.
No.
That's not what I'm talking about.
People pay taxes, Mike. So I'm asking you why tax dollars should be used to send a kid to private school
I'm saying
so that they
if
can
you
get
live
a better
in this
education.
district, right, if let's say you live in this school district, right, school district X, and you're paying school taxes in school district X, but you want your child to go to Catholic school, you shouldn't have to pay school taxes in that district if your child's not utilizing that service.
No, I totally disagree. I've never had to call the cops. Thank God my house has never been robbed. Does that mean I get back my tax money that goes towards the police department?
Not
just
at all,
because I'm not
it's
using
different,
it?
but that's a different kind of thing.
Why?
It's a different
Why is
service.
it different?
Because the cops are there for emergency purposes. They're there for those things that you're not going to be able to control.
Right, but if you live in a bad neighborhood, you're going to use the police more than if you live in a good neighborhood. So should the people in the good neighborhood get their taxes back?
No, but that's a different animal completely. It's apples and oranges.
Why?
Because schools are... If you have different options in schools, right? It's not like you have different options in cops where you could say, I'm getting this private security force and now I'm taking my taxes back and paying them rather than the cops.
No, hold on a second. You absolutely can hire private security if you could afford it, right? So if you could
But you're not doing that.
But let me ask you something. So if you could afford to get private security for your house, should you get your tax dollars back because you're not going to be using the police?
Not at all, no.
No, of course not. So
but
why should you get...
That's not what I'm saying. But this is apples and oranges. So
why?
Because it's a different animal completely. Education is a completely different kind of service.
We're talking about public services, Mike,
no,
and tax dollars.
Right, but it's different. It's still apples and oranges. I can go to a fruit store. It doesn't mean every fruit in there is the same fruit.
No, but you choose to go to a fruit store and buy whatever fruit you can afford. And if you can't afford to go to fruit store A, you might have to go to fruit store B. I don't understand why conservatives who don't believe in public intervention into private industry, why that ends when it comes to private schools. Private schools are private schools. Not everybody's going to be not everybody's going to be able to afford them. Again, I work my ass off to send my kids to
I'm not talking about taking a voucher and giving it to somebody who's not paying taxes into that school district. What I'm talking about is those people who choose to do something different. So in your case, you chose to send your kids to Catholic school,
right,
but your tax dollars were going to public schools that your kids didn't attend. I think that's wrong. I think it's unfair.
But public schools are public
taxation.
schools. You don't pay tuition for public schools, Mike. You don't pay school taxes only if you have kids in school. A school is a public service, just like the police, just like the fire department.
I don't disagree necessarily.
It's a community service. The community pays for it.
I don't necessarily disagree. I just think that it does a disservice to people in the community when they want to choose something different. I think the option should be there for them to have some freedom to choose something different.
But again, why not the option for private security if they're not happy with the police force in the neighborhood?
I mean, they could exercise that option, but then again, listen, I'm a big believer in the least amount of taxes. So you're never gonna, I think that taxation is theft. I think it's absolutely backwards.
But you have to pay for schools, you have to pay for police, you have to pay for roads. So we're not arguing tax rate. We're talking about what happens with tax money. And I just don't understand why only with schools do conservatives believe that tax money should be sent to give you access to a private enterprise. It doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't understand it.
The reason it really became popular, especially like right before I ran, within about a year or so before I ran, COVID really kind of brought it out into the open, I think into the forefront of people's minds. And a lot of that had to do with parents being able to finally see kind of what was being pushed in the schools. Right. And a lot of it was really, really just backwards, awful shit,
Okay.
Reverse racism, all kinds of LGBT mafia craziness, and a lot of things that they just did not agree with.
Okay.
And that was the big impetus for people to say, well, wait a minute, I don't want my kid learning this. I'm going to put them in a different school, and then finding out that they can't.
Stop. This is a public service. If you don't like it, change it. You have the power of the vote.
And that's the idea behind
this. You have the power, but no, that's not. That's running away from it. That's not changing it.
It's forcing the system to go back to what it should be.
No,
so
it's not.
if you bring in alternatives, right? So if I only have a choice between A and B, and I don't like A and B, and there's no C choice, then I'm stuck with A and B. But now if I bring in the C choice and I have a different choice, it's going to force these two to kind of up their game or bring their things back to maybe more of a midline.
But Mike, we're still talking about a public service. You keep saying it's apples and oranges. It's not.
It's public service. It is public service. But
when crime goes up in New York City and neighborhoods get hurt bad by it, should we give people the option to give them a tax voucher to pay for private security for their neighborhood? I would guess almost nobody would say yes.
No,
right? The idea would be to fix the police department, fix crime, right, and use our tax dollars wisely. But those same people who would say no to giving a voucher for private security will say yes, give a voucher for private school. I think it's because there's just a distaste in the conservative community for public schools, and maybe it's valid. Maybe it is, and we did see a lot of that in COVID. And
that's where it stems from.
Okay, but I get that. But if you're unhappy with a public service, which I do agree with you, you have every right to be, especially with the things you just brought up.
Sure.
If you're unhappy with a public service, well, take it to your public representatives. Get more involved.
I agree with that 100%.
You know what the vote turnout for school boards is, Mike? It's like 6%, 7%.
Yeah.
The answer to that is not to just give somebody tax money because you're saying that, this is your tax. That's not the way taxes work. Taxes, whether we like it or not, and whether we agree with the tax rate or not, taxes go into a big pot, and that pot is used by the people we elect in certain ways. If we don't like the way they're using those things,
and fund programs,
whatever it is, if we don't like the way they're using it, then we have to vote them out. But I just don't understand, again, in the conservative circles, which I run in and I live in, why only for schools, this is only for schools, Do we believe that the tax money you put into it should be used however you want to use it? But we don't do that for the police department. We don't do that for sanitation. You know, if our streets are dirty, should we be able to get a tax voucher and, you know, hire a private sanitation company to come clean our street? Of course not. You have to get politically involved and fix the issues you want to fix. As somebody who, again, I'll say it again, I work 3 jobs. You know, I left my house at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I got home at 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, because I chose to send my children to Catholic school. That's my choice. I didn't have the right to send them to Catholic school, and I certainly wasn't going to ask you to pay for it.
I don't think it's about, you know, making me pay for it necessarily. I don't want to see my tax dollars go to for your kids, whatever. What I want to see is maybe people get a tax break or some kind of tax incentive. So in other words, I want the money to follow the child, right?
But
because I want the pressure to be put back on these.
Why only that, Mike? Why not for every public service? What if the hospital in your neighborhood's not good? Why not give a voucher to get them to go get better medical care?
I don't like much of the publicly funded hospitals anyway. I've seen enough of them to know how badly they're run.
Of course they are. That's the point. So, but there are people who live in areas where that's all they got, right? So why not give them a voucher to get better health care?
I agree. Listen, I'm not necessarily against something like that.
I am.
I'm not against something where you force the system to operate at a level that it should be operating at, not this complete boondoggle of a mess that we have, whether it's healthcare, education. And listen, policing in America is a disaster right now. It is completely a disaster right now.
But I just don't think education is, it's not a bit, public education is not a business. I don't understand this whole idea that there has to be competition. To me, what happens with this so-called, I'll do, you air quote everything, so I'm going to air quote now. What happens with this competition is that all right, so we live in a community and the school is not good, right? So we give competition. Every one of the kids in that community is not going to be able to get into another school. There's just not enough schools, right? So, okay, we get a competition and they're going to get to choose the school they go to and everything. What that leaves for that school in that area, that school is made 1,000,000 times worse now. And the people who are stuck there are truly stuck there because there's no other place for them to go. So when schools lose, a school should be like a church was, right? The center of the community. School should be the community school. If kids in that community are not going to that school because they've got this, here come my air quotes again, this choice, right? And they get to choose where they want to go. Now the community has no more investment in that school. They don't care anymore, right? Because I, as a parent, well, I'm not sending my kid to that school, so I don't give a shit if that school's good anymore. I'm worried about that school 2 towns over where I'm sending my kid. You understand? So now that school rots to shit. And there's no community investment in there anymore. It's not the community center. It's not where you go to see the plays and you go to, you know, mingle with the other parents and have the PTA meetings. I just don't see any good that comes out of this. And I'm not accusing you of this, but conservatives in general, I just think they have such a distaste for public schools because of the things that are going on, and I get it. But such a distaste that I don't think this is about fixing education. I think this is about trying to destroy or punish public education, even if it's not a kind. And again, I'm not accusing you of it.
No. That's definitely part of it. Listen, and I think that if you go back and look at like 21 and even 2022, 2023, you'll see like some of these people, some of the bigger names in that space that we're talking about this, and it comes out very clearly that they're trying to punish the UFT and Weingarten and others, and it's basically just taking the opposite stance from these people and trying to kind of push their own conservative ideals or whatever it might be back on them. So I get the response because I agree. Listen, whether you agree with these you know, LGBT community or not, whatever, there's a time and place for everything, and it's inappropriate to push some of these things. And he went way beyond.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I
think that's what really led to a lot of this push.
This was going on way before that, Mike. The idea of school choice and vouchers and all of that
that's been around forever.
Way pre-COVID and
it's been around forever, but it became like the forefront issue it is now during that time because it brought it to most people's attention, and masks on kids and things like that.
Then do something about Mike. I've been to PTA meetings for 30 years. Okay, from the T part of PTA, and you know how many P parts of the PTA game, the parent part?
Yes.
Very
few. Yeah.
Okay, and I was in a fairly good district. Parents, this is a public education. Parents have every right. I can't stand when people say parents have no right to yell and scream at school boards. You do. You have every right. This is your kid's education. And even if you don't have a kid in the school, this is your community school, right? You do pay taxes and you do have a right. But if you want to fix public education, people have to be more involved in their school. Even if you don't have kids in there, it's still your community school, right? So be more involved in it, which you have every right to do because you're a taxpayer and this is a public service. So you have every right to be involved in your school. And I'm sorry, but and I know this for a fact because again, I taught for 32 years. I've had parents walk into the school not knowing which grade their kid was in.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not making that up.
No, yeah, that's the reality.
You have to be involved in your kid's education. So we could all yell and scream at the TV and say the union is garbage and they're doing this and
they don't
ills,
teach
but
them,
they're
blah,
not
blah,
the
blah.
only.
It's
The
part
answer
of the
is
problem,
not sending the kids from this community to another community. That's not going to do anything to fix this community.
This is not what I was. I've heard that spoken about. Where we're going to bust them out to over here. That to me is the worst possible idea ever because now you're just overloading one community and under.
Well, those kids have
another.
to go somewhere. If they're school choice, they have to go to a different school.
Right. My way of thinking with that is not so much the charter thing, but allowing for other school systems to kind of develop. So you could have private schools that develop where they get like that ability to go to that private school, so a Catholic school or even a private school.
But they're no longer private if the tuition is being paid with public money, Mike. That's
well,
not private.
But that's just what I'm saying. I'm not saying take that money and pay with public money. What I'm saying is you take your tax money and you put it in that school instead.
But that's not the way taxes work.
That's why we don't tax you. Listen, if you're not utilizing that school service, right? So either part of that money or all that money goes back to you so that you don't, I don't want to fund a school system that's failing. I think it's wrong.
But then all you're doing is using tax money to pay tuition, and you're making it like a tuition that you don't have to pay certain taxes because your kids don't go to school, but I do. That's not what a public service is. You said it's apples and oranges, but it's not. If I live in a safe neighborhood and I've never had to use the police, which most people don't, right?
I get your
point. You
point.
were a cop for a long time. Do most people use the police?
No, it's a small percentage.
Small percentage. So should only those people pay taxes that go to the police department?
That's not. I understand your point, and I absolutely get what you're saying, but I think you're missing.
Well, then why am I wrong? I'm
not saying you're wrong. I'm trying. Let me finish. What I'm trying to say, and you're not getting my point, is this. Okay, you can't fucking reward a failing system, and the administrators in these systems are corrupt. Listen, I'm all for unions. My dad's a union member. I had benefited from unions.
Wait, go back to the reward. What do you mean by reward?
I'm going to make my point. Just let me get to this. The unions, teachers' unions in this district and in this area, influence the school board elections. They've put tons of money into school board elections.
Of course they do.
And it's no wrong or no less wrong than APAC pumping tons of money to take Cory Bush out.
No, it's not. It's their community. It's their area. They're not going. They're not doing it
because this money's coming from the national level, in local school boards.
It's coming from union dues.
It's coming from they're pushing things that don't belong. Like they're
then
pushing,
argue that. You have every right to argue.
And we do. But just like with Cory Bush being pushed out by APAC, you have national level organizations pushing a tremendous amount of money in school board elections where people
that money is union dues. They're not taking the money from yes, it is. They're not taking it from somewhere else.
No, they're not taking union dues. This is them working in conjunction with PACs and other things to push agendas.
Yeah, look.
And I can document this for days for you. I've watched it.
I don't need you to. I know it, Mike. Public schools are a political institution. They're run by politicians, it's a political institution.
I want to see them brought back to a place where they're accountable, right? So I want accountability back. They are accountable. They're accountable to voters who don't give a shit. They're accountable to voters who don't show up at school board elections. They're accountable to parents who don't know what grade their kid is in. You can't put it all on parents. Administrators have to take but you are. Administrators have to take responsibility. And if bringing in a separate system on the same level that's going to draw off of them and take away their ability to monopolize and control everything, if that's the way you break the back of that power to get them back in track and so that things kind of balance back out again, and that's what you do.
Well, what are you talking about? Administrators or unions? You're going back and forth.
They're one and the same in a lot of places.
Not. They're absolutely not. The administrators union is small and nothing.
Well, no, I'm not talking about administrators unions. I'm talking about school administrators, right?
Yeah. And
then you have these unions, okay? And not the actual union teachers, because like I said, teachers are great. But when you get these people who've ascended to a certain level in these organizations, what happens? They become politicized.
Yeah, it's a
And they're
public
going to
institution.
become this unholy alliance.
What
and
does
you
that
start
mean? Unholy alliance with what?
So you get teachers union, politician, linked up with a high level administrator, right? Linked up with another politician, and what happens? They start talking, things start going, and now they start pushing agendas. That's how you see some of the really backwards, just awful programs that were pushed in school. There's some of the bad policy that leads to this. Look at Baltimore school system, right? How failing that is.
Yeah.
Why are we rewarding a failing system?
Again, I don't know what you mean by rewarding.
Allowing it to continue failing.
What are you supposed to do?
Stop. Figure something
Stop
out.
what? Shut the schools down?
Turn it
Don't
over.
send the kids to school?
Privatize the shit.
You can't privatize. That's like saying privatize the police. You can't privatize a public service, Mike.
Something.
Yeah, okay, do something is a great idea. Something what? You can't privatize a public service.
Sure you can.
No, you can't. It's a public service. It is not private. It's public. It's public school. It's public sanitation. It's public. We can't. Should we in the 1990s? Let me ask you something. In the 1990s, in early 1990s, when New York was leading the world in murders and we were basically Afghanistan, should we have privatized the police? No. We elected a mayor that came in and made the proper reforms, got the police working right, followed by another mayor who also did reforms, got it working right. You don't privatize the police because it's failing. You elect people that are going to do what you want to do. That's what we do in a representative democracy.
And that's being undermined at the very local
No, it
level
is
where
not
it matters.
undermined.
Yes, it is.
No, it is
Yes,
not.
it is. It's being undermined at the fucking local
No, it's
level by
under-
unions that don't know their
It is
limits.
No, they know their limits because
No,
there
they
are
don't.
limits because you have a contract. Mike, you worked for a union. I mean, you belong to
I'm
the
not
union too.
anti-union, but I am anti-people using that power to leverage to help themselves,
No,
help their friends, and screw regular people. And
Mike,
I've watched it happen
the power
multiple
is
times.
in the voters.
I
There
know
is
a teacher-
Apathy. There is apathy. You're an active parent in your school district. What percentage of parents are active in your school district?
Maybe 20,
Okay.
30.
So really, then that's not where the blame lies.
No, I'm not saying that's
If
not part of
80
it.
If 80%
I'm not
of them were
saying-
active, Mike, would your school be different?
Absolutely, but I'm
Okay.
not saying. But listen, that's not. But you see, what we're doing is we're taking one little piece and making it right, and that doesn't work that way because there's many pieces that play. I said in the beginning of this that teachers are amazing for the most part, which is why that poll looks
Forget
the way
the
it does.
workers, forget the teachers and the cops. We're not talking about
Forget
that. We're
all
talking
that.
about
Okay.
the system.
All right, and the system itself. Do parents have a part to play? Absolutely. Are they a big part of the problem? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, this whole idea that, and not my child, no, he would never, or she would never, bullshit. Your child's an asshole. Every child's an asshole. Deal with your kids.
Every child
Right?
has a potential to be an asshole.
They're assholes. They're terrorists. No, I love my kids, but they're terrorists. But that point being said, there is an impetus on the parents to get involved and do things. But what happened during the times when parents did get involved and do things? We had the FBI investigating parents at school board meetings.
Yeah.
We had targeting of parents in all kinds of other vicinities.
So give up.
I know a no, not give up. I know a teacher who ran for school board, right? Great guy, really smart, very, very he's like you. Highly intelligent, very dedicated guy. He truly, truly cared about it. He runs for school board, he loses, okay? Except when he lost, they give you a transcript of the vote count and everything else.
Right.
And what do you think the transcript showed? He won. So 6 hours after the polls closed, somehow a machine mysteriously adds 800 votes to the union candidate.
Okay, so it was a corrupted election.
Right. But when we looked at this guy's case, and we did look into this guy's case, guess what we found?
I don't know.
Across the state, constantly the same thing.
What?
And the same parties involved. The unions and the same school board members across the state. These people who work in the background, right? The
Right.
same kind of contractors, basically.
And what was the percentage of turnout in that election?
For his district, actually his district's very high. I'm not going to say because I don't want to out him, but it's very...
You're not going to out him by giving me a percentage. What was the
I'm not
participation
going to say the
rate?
district, but the numbers were, I think in his district, it's something in like the 60 to 70% range.
So you told me 60-70% of the community voted in this election.
In that school board, but they consistently do that in that community.
I'd love to see that number.
Well, it's a very, it's definitely one of the more involved districts, I guess you'd say. It's a very wealthy area. People are very involved there.
Every public institution is going to have corruption. We know that, right? Whether it's schools or police departments or fire departments.
But when the
or whatever.
corruption reaches a certain level, you have to do something.
Yeah, okay, so fine. So do something, but the idea is not to blow it up. Again, I'll go back to my question, which you didn't answer. When New York City was falling apart in the early 1990s, and crime was rampant. The answer was not to defund the
And my
police,
point is,
right?
and my point is that exactly what I just
But you
said.
want to defund the public school. You said you want to shut down the Baltimore schools.
No,
That
I
to me
want
is
to
just
bring
as-
in a separate system that can actually compete with to
What
force
is
it
this-
back,
what
or
is this-
fire every fucking administrator in there and put in new people and bring it back to where it should be.
Mike, that does happen. States do take over local schools when they are that corrupt. You should know that, and you do know that, right? States do that. They have the power. A city, a township that is not sovereign. The state is
No,
sovereign.
it's not sovereign.
Okay,
The state is
sovereign.
ultimate authority, right?
Right.
I get it.
The state is sovereign.
But
The state can come in and take over
when
any
you get
local
into,
school
like-
system, and they have. They
Well,
have.
and when
They've
you
done
get
it
into,
in
like-
Michigan. They've
so-
done it in Maryland. They've done it in many places.
Let's talk about the corruption for a second, right? 47 different school districts in New York State, right? All tied to the same three big construction companies. I'm going to name all these unnamed because it's still an active
You
thing.
don't even have to. I know you're right.
Right, all tied together.
Yes.
Okay? And the whole idea is awarding contracts.
Yes.
Right? And these people pay millions of dollars to make sure they get
Yes.
the school board members they want in every fucking election.
Yes.
And that is absolutely backwards. And that's
Yes.
why. So, my point being is this is why I think our system is corrupted. But my stance on it.
But you're talking about our political system. That
But I'm
goes
talking
so
about-
far beyond the school.
Right, but this is what's affecting, and this is what's affecting the schools.
Mike-
This corruption here is what's steering the schools to where they
We
are.
know that, and the corruption in the government is what makes police departments not work. It's what makes sanitation
Right.
departments not
So
work.
my idea is,
we know that
you can bankrupt that system. You can. There's a lot of ways to deal with corruption, right? Obviously, you want to
But
investigate,
there are
charge.
victims when you bankrupt, Mike. If you're talking just like the defund the police people because
No.
they were unhappy.
I'm not
with
talking
the
about
police service.
bankrupting the school itself. I'm talking about bankrupting the people behind these corrupt cabals. So what I'm saying is, if you can create the separate system where there's not this constant flow of money into this particular system, they're siphoning off of. If you take the money flow out of that system and force it down to the lowest level possible, so that individual local community school, rather than at the higher level where it filters down, right? So if we took our tax dollars and we said, okay, your kid goes to, this particular school on block X. So now school X is going to get the money from this particular part of the community, and it's going to flow directly into school X. And they're going to be able to kind of steer it better. So you'll have
Who gets to go to school X?
whoever lives in that zone of school X's school.
So
right?
you're changing them from going to this building to that building, and that does what?
I'm changing the way the money flows.
But it has to flow to some building, right? So it has
Yeah,
to go.
but if you flow it
So
to the most local level and you leave the
shut this-
parents and the teachers
Okay,
and the school
you
administrator.
shut this school down.
No,
Those
I'm
kids
not
have to
talking about
go-
shutting schools down, mind you, right? I'm not saying shut schools down. See, this is where school choice becomes like confusing to people, right? So there's so many different ideas out there floating around about how to do it, and this is what I found during my campaign when we talked about school choice a lot. We got so many disparate ideas, different plans, different things, and people were all over the fucking map with it. I mean, all over the map with it.
Yeah.
And my idea was nothing that radical. I'm not defunding anything. Obviously, I'm not defunding the police. I'm not defunding schools. What I'm talking about is change the way the money flows. Because the way the money system is set up for schools right now, it allows all that graft to happen.
Okay, fine, change the way the money flows, but that's not where this conversation started, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about
We're talking about school choice, but if you change the way the money flows, you can operate in a way that would not defund the schools, but would still allow for school choice.
But again, schools are not a business. Competition is not the answer to everything, any more than it would be. And you keep saying it's apples and oranges. It's not any more than it would be for the police or for the fire department. A public service is a public service. Public schools are a public service. They're there to serve the public by educating children. Cops are there to serve the public by protecting the community.
Right.
Firemen are there to serve the
I'm not
It's
disagreeing
all
with you.
public service.
What I'm talking
You
about
can't-
is the way you approach them, though, because we're not going to approach these things the same way.
But we're way beyond that conversation now. Of course, there's always changes in the way the money flows. Bloomberg came in and changed all of that here in New York City with the education system. It didn't do a damn thing. We're not talking about that. When we're talking about school choice, I know that there's different variations of it and everything, but we're talking about the one that most people think of when you think of school choice, which is that your kid has a choice of what school to go to, right? That's the whole idea. That whether it's publicly funded charter schools or vouchers to go to private schools. That's what we mean by school choice ultimately. Well, the little minutia of how it's going to work is irrelevant. What the issue is do you get to choose to go to a different school? So again, community, and we're talking about, for the viewers out there, some of these people live in areas where there's one school, there's one elementary school, one middle school, one high school
Sure.
in their entire area.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's their
The whole
whole
town,
school
that's the
district.
school system.
Maybe 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school. That's their whole system, right?
Yeah.
What exactly choice are they going to have? Do they get to go on a bus and travel 16 hours to another school? No, of course not. Now you take the opposite of that here in New York City, where you have school districts where you're within a 20-minute bus ride of maybe 20 different schools in the same district, right? District 26 has about 20 elementary schools, all in northeastern Queens. Okay, so now you talk about school choice. All right, so this school sucks. There's 2,000 kids in this school. They have to go somewhere. They're not all going to get seats in those other schools. That's number one.
Not. Yeah, because you overload those other schools.
Even if you build a couple of charter schools around, you're not going to have enough seats to build it. So somebody's going to be left in that school there. There's going to be no community interest in that school anymore because the community doesn't go there. That school is now going to go to complete shit from partial shit. The second way of doing this with vouchers, again, I will go back to the fact that as a conservative, the idea that public money should be spent on private enterprise blows my mind that any conservative would believe in that. And why in God's name would anybody want this government involved in a religious school?
No, I don't want the government involved in any school.
No, and they certainly shouldn't not be involved in religious schools. Private schools are for people who could afford it. Religious schools, the churches have scholarships that they give out or whatever, and there's different ways for other people, or you can work your ass off and send your kid there. As a conservative, I do not want the government in charge of my children's Catholic schools because I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. As soon as they start teaching Catholic doctrine, which goes against every single thing that our government here in New York City stands for. Right? If they have any power over that, and the second they put $1 into it, Mike, you know they got the power over it, right? It's their money.
That's my point with the money flow. So
well, then why would you want it flowing into a Catholic school or into a Jewish school or a Muslim school?
Because I want it flowing directly from the parent to the school.
But again, that's not the way taxes work. And stop with the apples and oranges. You
what
can't
I'm talking
give me
about
a voucher
is changing.
to get a private security system.
I'm not talking about vouchers.
You are.
No, I'm not.
But that's what we're talking about.
I never said voucher. You said voucher 100 times. I
We
never
were
said
just
fucking
talking
voucher.
about it now.
No,
and you said
I'm
that that's
talking
where
about the
money
flow
would
of money. I said the flow of money. So take that money and stop taking it. So this parent is not paying money into this school because their child's not going to school. They're paying money to this school because their child's going to this school. Put the money back in the parent's pocket. Put it back in the schools where it belongs. So even if you scrap that,
again, only for schools, right? That's the only public service that happens with.
Yeah, because the
Not
schools
with any other
because this
public
wouldn't
service.
work for anywhere else. But
Why
for
not?
schools, you could make it work. So just let me finish.
Okay, but
So
then I want
if
you to
you-
tell me why it wouldn't work for any other public system.
For a number of reasons,
Why?
right? Because you would enable all kinds of stupidity on other levels with other things. But with schools, if you put the money directly back in that school. So what I'm saying is I don't want the state to have the money. I don't even want the damn city to have the damn money. I want the school to have the money they're supposed to have. Right? That's it.
But the school is part of the city, Mike. It's run by the city.
But that's the problem.
You're making the tax dollars out almost like tuition. You're saying that the money should follow the child.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way.
But it could, and it would work if it was done
No, when
properly.
I say it doesn't work that way, I don't mean obviously it's not working that way now. I'm saying that's not the way taxes work. Everybody in New York City pays taxes. Part of those taxes go to the public schools. It doesn't matter if you have a kid in that school or not. That school is going to make or break.
Okay.
Well, let me finish. That school is going to make or break your community. That school is what's educating the children of your community, whether they're your children or not. Once your kids graduate, you're not divested from the public school system anymore. It is a part of your community. It is a public service to the children of your community. And by the way, schools offer public services to a lot of other different things also. But what I find so interesting and so hypocritical is that people say exactly what you just said before. That, oh no, this will work for schools, but no, there's no way it could work for the police. And again, you never gave me an answer why not. When New York City was a hellhole in the early 1990s, why couldn't we just give people vouchers, their money, and let the money follow them, like you're saying with schools, right? And let them hire private security firms to protect their neighborhood. Why is it fair to a bad neighborhood in New York City that they have to suffer like that? Give them money, It's their tax money. Let it follow them, and let them hire a private security agency to protect their neighborhood. I don't understand why you keep saying that's not the same concept. Why is this only for public schools? It's only for my area, but not for yours. I don't get it.
That's not what I'm saying. It's not for my area.
It
not
is
for
what
yours.
you said. It's
That's
for
not
education,
even
but not
remotely.
for police.
And it is, because there's different things. They're different
I
public
know
services.
they're different things, Mike.
They're critical services. So police are there for emergencies.
Right.
Schools are not there for emergencies. They're not there for, it's not emergent. Education is important and it's critical in its own regard. Absolutely. It's probably more critical than a lot of other things that
Was the
get
police
funding.
department working, doing its job in the early 1990s?
They were doing what they could, but they were also being
Schools are
hamstringed
doing
by-
what they can too. Exactly. Right. They're being hamstrung by the politicians above them.
Exactly my point.
Right.
Exactly
The
my
issue
point.
is not the police department, the people in the police department.
But here's my thing. If you take, and I'm not even talking about taking the money out of public schools. What I'm saying is, let's say you have public school X on Street X, okay? Then this is that for that community. Take the friggin' money out of the state, take the money out of the city, and make the money from the community in that community, and whatever funds they need, go to that school, for that school to administrate and distribute and do what they
That's
need to do
the way
with.
it works here on Long Island. You literally have a quote unquote school tax.
Right.
Right?
And that's
Most places don't. This is
Right.
something that's unique out here. People out there, like I said, some people who could be watching us could be living in Nebraska where literally their district is 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and 1 high school.
Right. But I just
That's
wanna
it.
see the-
Here in Long Island, you literally do pay school taxes, and that's why you do have such different levels of schooling out here. Areas where those taxes are, where you have more wealthy people, and those taxes tend to have better schools. Right?
Well,
in
that's-
New
yeah,
York,
that's,
in a place
yeah.
like New York City or Chicago, it is a completely different system, Mike.
Right.
The people
And-
pay city taxes,
and that funds those public
and that
services.
funds every public
Every
service.
public service,
right?
right. EMS,
you
fire,
can't just say
police,
in New York
schools.
City, where again there are in every single district there's 20 elementary schools, right? All throughout the 5 boroughs, we have 31 districts. They all have 10, 15, 20 elementary schools. It doesn't work like that. You can't say that the tax money
idea
is like
of-
tuition and it's going to come into my pocket and I get to pay to go to this school if it's private, or I
One
get to
spouse
choose that
child,
school.
right.
But it just can't possibly work that way in a system like New York City. And it can't work that way in a system like in rural Nebraska where there's only a couple of schools. Again, these are public services, Mike. I'm going to go back again to the early 1990s when there was crime all over the city.
I
We
understand the point
elected
you're
a
trying to
mayor.
make, yeah.
That mayor came in. He came in like a fucking bulldozer, Giuliani.
No,
Right?
he did. And he crushed
And
it.
he took transit housing and the regular police and merged
Yeah,
them.
yep.
He undid the entire
Cops
system.
call that, the old school
and-
cops call it the hostile takeover.
Well, but you know what? It worked.
No,
right?
it did, because he
It
got them all on
worked.
the same page and
Right.
moved it forward.
Because when we had housing, transit, and
They were all going in their own directions.
of course. But it worked, right? We elected a mayor, and it worked. So if people are really that upset about the school system, which again I don't believe they are, because most people are very satisfied with their school. Every survey shows that. So they're really talking about, I'll do your air quotes, other people's schools when they're talking
I
about
think
the
they're talking more about the
system.
administration
So
level.
90% of parents, 85% of parents are happy with their kid's teacher, and they're happy with their kid's school, but they have it in their head that the education system is terrible. We need people in any public service to demand that their politicians fix the problems. That's the best way to do it.
And
in a
this is-
system
this
like
is
we have.
But this is, so when we talk about school choice,
My
right?
ass is killing me on this chair.
Yeah, I know. So when we talk about like the school choice thing, so we talked about that, and the idea behind it is this: is to put that kind of pressure on the politician, put that kind of pressure on these administrators at the higher levels, because it's not the teachers, right? Because your poll is exactly right. It's not the teachers. The vast majority of teachers are well liked because they do their job well and they
But
work
the vast
their
majority
asses
of
off.
schools are well liked, Mike.
Exactly, because it's the teachers in those schools.
Okay.
But now when you go above that school, here comes the problem. So I think that
Of course.
I think the focus for conservatives that you're right about is that their focus is on the wrong level, because I've seen a lot of conservatives go out and they'll blame the teachers, which I don't agree with. Or they'll go out and they'll just blame the union, which, okay, partially, like I said, double-edged sword. I'm all for unions, and I think unions are important in keeping that balance and things. Absolutely, they keep things in check. They're a check on power, they're a balance. So I put partly with that, but mostly, I mean, I think that mostly comes from just because some of these union heads are more vocal than others, and they make things loud. But there's partly to blame for that. But the administrators, these bureaucrats, that
when you say
shouldn't be-
administrators, what do you mean? Because when I say administrators, I think principal and assistant principals.
No,
what do you
not
mean
even
by
remotely.
administrators?
I'm talking beyond superintendent and above.
Okay, so you're talking about the actual school system. I'm going to
Yeah.
use your air quotes.
Yeah, the system. The ones above the people
Okay.
actually doing the work.
Right. What about
Which
them?
you need framework. You need that kind of administration framework that's going to kind of keep the parts moving and everything, right? Okay.
But those people run the entire system.
And they're the ones that are breaking the system.
Okay, fine. I don't disagree with you. I always think that the people on top, if it's a business, right? If Macy's fails,
CEO
it's failing
is
because the
ultimately
CEO
responsible.
Right. Although the CEO never gets punished for it, right? They
No, they get a golden parachute and everybody else
and
gets
all the
screwed.
people who work at Macy's get fired, right?
But that's the idea. So the idea is to try and change that whole way of
Okay.
things and bring it
So
back to a place where it can actually
We
be.
don't disagree over the problem. You know,
Not
the
at all.
problem
No,
is
I'm
not-
with you on it 100%.
I don't understand how in the world these solutions, and again, I know you said there's different variations of it. When we talk about school choice, we
There's
all
a
know
whole,
what we're talking about.
There's a whole range of it.
We're talking about charter schools, or we're talking about
Charter
being able
schools
to
and the
choose
vouchers
which
are
school you're
two
going
biggest ones that were pushed.
to. Right. So
Yeah.
let's just stick with that because we can't get into the minutia of how it would be run in Wisconsin or how it's run in
Right,
different
the
areas,
finer
right?
details, right?
That to me, the only problem that fixes in my mind is this disdain that many conservatives, and again, I'm a conservative, okay, I'm a conservative. To me, it's the disdain that conservatives have for public schools. Because when they see public schools, they do see this LGBTQ things going on. They do see the the lack of discipline. They do see all the things that most of conservatives don't like, and I just think it's an attempt to try to eradicate that and get rid of that. Where
100%.
if you just use your power as a voter, as a community member,
Get the hell out and
to
get involved.
get involved and get in there. And I know you said the whole thing about the IRS and everything. You know what? The IRS cannot investigate every single American. If every parent is involved in their child's education and involved in their child's school, and not just the parents, the community, the school serves the community, just like the police serve the community, just like the hospitals serve the community. That's the answer in a democracy. This whole thing with vouchers and all of that, to me, that's just a conservative version of the defund the police. That's it, to me.
I
That's what
understand the
it appears
analogy,
to me.
and listen, I
It
understand
appears
the
to
analogy.
me
I get
that
the
you're
point.
saying defund public schools because you're mad at it. And that's like the liberals
No, I
were
wanna
mad at
see
the
it.
police. After George Floyd, they were mad at the police. Defund it. Blow it up. That's what they kept talking about.
Oh,
All right,
no.
blow it up and reimagine
wanna-
it and all of that sort of
No,
stuff.
I don't want to do any of that stuff. What I want to do is see accountability brought to bear, right?
There should be,
Right.
always.
And I want to see accountability brought to bear. And I think that is one way that you kind of show them that they're failing and you give students a chance to succeed.
But again, I don't understand how. They have to go somewhere.
Right.
Right? They have to go somewhere. So if you're in like a New York City type situation, if you have 2,000 kids in a school, that school is failing. You tell those parents, okay, you could choose what school to send your kids to. Well, which schools are you going to overcrowd now? And what happens to the kids who can't get a seat in another school? What happens to the kids who don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and take 18 trains to get to Staten and a ferry to get to Staten Island where there's a so-called good school?
Right.
That's not the answer. The answer is to fix that school that's failing. That's the answer.
Well, again, I don't think I'm sure individual schools fail for bad leadership, for a principal that's bad or something like that. I'm sure it happens. But I haven't experienced it personally. But, we've had great principals, and honestly, 99% of teachers we have are great. We had one problem, one teacher would
Then
eat
what's your issue then?
with schools.
Yeah.
Out here, no problems. I have no issue with my schools.
Well, then why don't you let the people who have a problem with their schools deal with it? Like that's what I said at the beginning of the thing with the survey. Like, I don't understand. If you're so satisfied with your children's schools,
To a certain degree.
then
But there's things I don't like.
Why do you
like,
have this belief that public education is so bad? If your
It's
experience
not,
is good.
Because what you're trying to do is paint this big thing, and I'm talking about specific points and problems, right? So we're kind of missing each other because you're doing the big landscape, but I'm doing like the tree down here.
No, I feel like you're doing the big landscape because you're saying your kid's
Yeah,
school is
we're
great.
missing each other. We've got to pass
Because you're
each
saying
other.
your kid's school is great.
They are,
And that the
listen,
schools
I
in
have,
this area here are great.
I have tremendous respect
But
for teachers.
somehow you're telling me that public education is
There's a problem
bad.
with, and I do think there's a problem with public education. That said, I do think part of it is media talking points that are pushed by one side or the other.
course, yeah.
to push whatever agendas. But that being, I do think there are problems with the public education system. I think it's far more, though, than just the schools themselves. I do think that the parents play a big part in that. I think the systems play a big part in that. But for me, what I see when I'm talking about school choice, what I see is these administrators at the mid-level to upper level, beyond the school, the guys outside the school. Your principal's in the school with you in the ground, in the trenches every day. He knows what's going on in his school. He knows, or she knows, what's happening, where the problems lie, and how to fix their things.
Some of those principals suck, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, turds float up.
Can I just tell you something? About an hour ago, we had said, do you really think we can get 15, 20 minutes in talking about
hell
education?
Yeah, we could do this all day.
That was an hour ago. We were. So I just want to tell you what I think the real problem is.
What do you think it is?
Lindsey Graham.
Fuck that guy. See, I told you he was involved somewhere.
Take a shot. Mike, we gotta go, man. This has been an hour, right?
That was a great conversation. We hope you guys enjoyed it.
How many people you think actually stayed for the whole thing?
Everybody. It was awesome.
Let me tell you something. If you stayed for this whole thing, you gotta subscribe because you're out of your freaking mind. If you watched us for an hour doing that, subscribe.
Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on the school system.
They're all going to agree with you.
What do you? Well, no. I want to know why, though. I want to know what you think is actually wrong, where you think the problem lies, and how you think we fix it. Listen, you heard this whole conversation, so you've got a tremendous amount of ideas and information coming at you about on both sides.
They're all
of this.
going to agree with you. I'm the evil teacher union guy.
No. Listen, teachers are amazing people. Okay, we have some bad actors out there in various places, but the teachers are amazing people. Give them the respect they deserve.
Listen, I did it for 32 years, and I can tell you, I could count on my fingers the amount of really bad teachers that I worked with.
Yeah, it's like anywhere.
In 32 years.
Listen, it's like anywhere.
And you work with bad cops.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it happens.
But it doesn't mean blow up the system.
No, it's not what we're talking about. School choice should never be about ending any kind of system, or it should just be about bringing back accountability. But there's all kinds of ways, and you're right, to bring back that accountability.
There is, and if I can't change your mind, then the next video, I'm sorry, I'm gonna push defunding the police. Defund the police.
We'll do that another day. All right, guys. Like, subscribe,
comment down
there. We want to hear your thoughts on schools and what you think on the education system, where you think the problems lie, and what you see in your own communities. Okay?
And if you watch this for an hour,
God bless you.
Woo, good for you, baby.
Yeah, good for you. You're a glutton for punishment. You're gonna be a masochist. All right.
Good night. We gotta go milk the cows.
Bye.